The late afternoon sun streamed through the tinted glass walls of Hanseong Tower, bathing the 32nd floor in golden light. The hum of the city below was a distant murmur, softened by the height. Inside, Tae-soo sat at his massive walnut desk, his posture as perfect as the crease in his charcoal Armani suit. He was the kind of man who made people nervous, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes so sharp they could slice through lies. His black hair was styled immaculately, his voice calm and clipped when he spoke to his staff. To the women in the building, and truthfully, to women in nearly every business circle in Seoul, he was more than a CEO. He was the fantasy. Wealth, power, looks, and that cold, untouchable air that only seemed to make him more desirable. Every week, gifts arrived at his office. Love letters, designer watches, expensive pens, perfume, handmade scarves. But if they were waiting for him to pick one, they'd be waiting forever. His real focus was Hanseong Group, the tech and investment empire he'd inherited and expanded. Love was a distraction. Or so he told himself. That was, until she wasn't like the others. She wasn't rich, she didn't drown him in flattery, and she never seemed impressed by his name. She'd met him at a charity event and teased him for looking too stiff in his tux. Somehow, she'd seen past the CEO and found the man. They'd been together for 2 years. And when he finally proposed, it was with the kind of certainty Tae-soo rarely felt about anything. Though the news broke the heart of so many women who couldn't stop wanting him, but the wedding was to be the event of the year. Every elite invited, every headline ready. The day was perfect. The sky was a crystal blue, the air soft with spring warmth. Tae-soo left the hotel that morning in his tailored ivory suit, on the way to meet Gae at the cathedral. But fate, cruel and merciless, had its own plans. The car crash came in a blur of screeching tires and shattering glass. His chauffeur swerved to avoid a truck that had run a red light, but the impact slammed Tae-soo into the side door, his face taking the brunt of the shattered window. When he woke in the hospital, pain lanced through the left side of his face. A bandage covered half of it. His surgeon's voice was careful when he explained. The cut was deep. We did what we could, but there will be a scar. It's permanent. I'm sorry. The next days were a haze of morphine and restless nights. At first, Jae visited. She held his hand, told him not to worry. But her visits grew shorter. She stopped holding his hand. Then she stopped coming altogether. One rainy afternoon, she appeared again. Not in her usual soft sweaters, but in a stiff designer dress, makeup flawless, eyes cold. She didn't sit. She stood at the foot of his bed, dropped an envelope onto his lap, and set a small velvet box beside it. I'm sorry, Tae-soo. I can't do this. He blinked at her, stunned. What are you saying? She crossed her arms. I can't marry you. I don't want to spend my life with someone who looks like this. Her gaze flicked to the side of his face, then away, as if the sight hurt her. It's not what I signed up for. The words hit harder than the crash ever had. She picked up the engagement ring, stared at it for a moment, then tossed it onto his bed. It bounced once and rolled toward his shoulder. Find someone else, Tae-soo. Goodbye. She left before he could speak. The sound of her heels faded down the hall until there was nothing but the steady beep of the heart monitor. The tabloids feasted on the story. Scarred CEO abandoned by bride-to-be. Hanseong Group's golden boy in hiding. He stopped attending meetings. Even with the best suits and the sharpest haircuts, the scar, running from his temple to just below his jaw, was impossible to miss. Worse was the way people looked at it. Some stared too long. Others tried not to look at all, their eyes darting away like his face was a car wreck they couldn't unsee. Therapy helped little. Night after night, Jae's words replayed in his mind like poison. By the time a year had passed, the once untouchable Tae-soo had become a recluse in his own penthouse. Staff came and went quietly, barely speaking to him. He kept only the most essential meetings, almost always online with his camera off. And that was how he met Chisholm, though neither of them knew their lives were about to change. Rain slicked the streets of Seoul that Monday morning, the kind of heavy drizzle that clung to hair and soaked shoes no matter how carefully you walked. Chisholm stood at the edge of the Hanseong Tower complex, clutching a small, worn leather bag to her chest. She had never imagined she would be here, not after losing her small cafe job 2 months ago when the landlord hiked the rent beyond reason. Her last few savings had barely covered rent for her tiny studio in Mapogu. If she didn't find steady work soon, she'd be on a flight back to Lagos. When the job listing appeared, live-in nanny, discretion required, experience preferred, she almost skipped it. But the pay was more than generous, and something about the curt wording made her curious. The address led her not to a family apartment, but to Hanseong Group's private residence building. Security was tight, but the guards had her name on a list. Top floor. Private elevator. One said, scanning her ID. The elevator doors opened to a silent, polished world. White marble floors. Modern black leather furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the city's skyline blurred by rain. A tall man in his 40s, hair neatly parted, expression neutral, greeted her. Miss Chisholm? I'm Mr. Park, the household manager. You'll be caring for Mr. Han's nephew. He's 6. Energetic. His parents are overseas. She blinked. Mr. Han? You'll meet him soon enough, Mr. Park said, already walking down the hall. There are a few rules. Keep your voice down in the main wing. Meals for Mr. Han are prepared by the chef. You are not to disturb him unless necessary. And one more thing. He stopped at a door. Don't comment on his appearance. Before she could ask what he meant, the door opened. Tae-soo stepped out. Chisholm had seen handsome men before, in Lagos, in the dramas she secretly binged, even in the cafes of Hongdae, but the man before her was something else entirely. Tall, broad shoulders filling the hallway, dressed in a simple black sweater and trousers. His hair fell perfectly across his forehead, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass. And then she saw it, the scar. A thick, pale line running from his left temple, slicing across his cheek, and ending just above his jawline. It was deep enough to suggest the violence of whatever caused it, yet healed enough to tell the story was not recent. He looked at her like she was just another inconvenience in a long day. You're the nanny? His voice was deep, even, but with a thread of something colder underneath. Chisholm straightened. Yes, sir. Chisholm. You're not Korean. She smiled faintly. No, sir. His eyes flicked down, scanning her. The modest navy dress, the black flats, the small bag. His gaze lingered on her hair, gathered into a neat puff of curls at the crown of her head. Follow the rules. Keep the boy out of trouble. Don't try to be friendly with me. And with that, he walked past her. Her first few days in the penthouse were quiet, almost awkwardly so. She spent most of her time with little Minjun, a bright-eyed 6-year-old who loved dinosaurs and would rather eat cookies than dinner. She learned quickly that Mr. Han, or rather, Tae-soo, was a man of strict routines. Early mornings in the gym, hours in his home office, meals alone, rarely a smile. But sometimes, when Minjun told a particularly ridiculous joke or when Chisholm accidentally hummed while making cocoa, she caught something, the tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth, a flicker of warmth before he shut it down again. One evening, as she tucked Minjun into bed, Chisholm found Tae-soo standing in the doorway. He likes you, he said. She smiled. He's easy to like. You'll find it harder with me. She turned, meeting his gaze. I'm not here to like you, sir. I'm here to work. Something in his eyes shifted, as if he wasn't sure whether to be annoyed or impressed. Good. Keep it that way. But the next morning, she caught him lingering near the kitchen as she prepared Minjun's breakfast, his coffee mug in hand. He didn't say anything, just watched her quietly until Mr. Park called him away. It was late on her second Friday when the first real crack appeared in his walls. A storm had knocked out the power temporarily. The penthouse was dim, lit only by the faint city glow outside. Chisholm was in the kitchen, searching for candles, when she heard a sharp breath behind her. She turned. Tae-soo stood there, his face half-shadowed. You're not afraid of the dark? He asked. She shook her head. I've lived through worse than a few minutes, without electricity. His gaze lingered on her longer than usual, the scar catching the faint light. Most people look away. You don't.
Her voice was calm.
Scars don't scare me, Mr. Han. People do worse things than leaving marks on skin. For the first time, she saw it, the way his eyes softened just a little. And for the first time, he didn't walk away. The next few weeks unfolded in a strange rhythm. Chisholm had expected to be invisible to the CEO who lived at the other end of the penthouse, but that wasn't how it went. At first, it was small things. He lingered a few seconds longer in the kitchen when she was there. He walked past the playroom, even though Minjun didn't need anything. Sometimes, she'd glance up from making tea, to find him watching her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. One rainy Thursday, she caught him in the study, staring out at the city. He didn't hear her approach until she set a tray down on the side table. "What's this?" he asked, without turning. "Ginger tea. For the headache you've been pretending you don't have all day." His head turned sharply. "How did you?" She gave him a small, knowing smile. "Minjun mentioned you've been rubbing your temple since morning." He looked down at the steaming cup. "You're perceptive. It's part of the job." She shrugged. "People are easier to care for when you notice things." For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then he picked up the cup, took a slow sip, and muttered almost to himself, "No one's made me tea in over a year." That night, she found herself lying awake, thinking about his voice when he'd said it, quiet, almost fragile under all that steel. The first real breach happened on a Saturday evening. Minjun had insisted on a pillow fort in the living room. Tae-soo, surprisingly, appeared halfway through construction, standing there in his perfectly tailored black sweater, like he'd stepped into the wrong dimension. "What is this?" "A fortress," Chisholm replied, balancing two cushions. "It's chaos." "Chaos," she corrected, with structure. "Come on, hold this." She handed him a blanket before he could protest. For a man who negotiated billion-won deals, Tae-soo looked hilariously uncertain about how to drape a blanket over two dining chairs. But when Minjun laughed, that open, pure kind of laughter only children had, something in his shoulders loosened. By the time the fort was complete, the three of them were inside it, a small lamp casting a golden glow. Minjun was curled up with his toy dinosaur, Chisholm cross-legged with a mug of cocoa. Tae-soo sat with one knee bent, watching them both quietly. She caught his gaze once, and for a fraction of a second, there was no coldness there at all. Later that night, as she was tidying the cushions, he came to the kitchen. "You're different." She looked up. "Different from what?" "From people I've known. You don't look at me like," he broke off, jaw tightening. "Like I'm broken." Her voice was steady. "Because you're not." They stood there, the hum of the fridge filling the space between them. His eyes dropped briefly to her lips before he stepped back abruptly. "Good night, Chisholm." The next morning, the coldness was back, but not as sharp. The turning point came unexpectedly. It was a Friday afternoon when Chisholm returned from the park with Minjun to find Tae-soo in the lobby, arguing in low, clipped tones with a man in a tailored navy suit. The man left quickly, but not before Chisholm caught the tail end of the words, "She's back in Seoul." Later that night, she found Tae-soo in the balcony lounge, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. "Bad day?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "Someone I used to know has returned." Chisholm leaned against the doorframe. "Someone who hurt you?" His eyes flicked to hers, sharp, assessing. "You think you know me that well already?"
"No."
"But I know the look of a man who's been hit in the same place twice." That pulled a faint, humorless smile from him. "You're dangerous." "How so?" "You see too much." She took a small step forward, their eyes locking in the dim light. "Maybe you need someone to." The silence stretched, thick with something unspoken. His gaze dropped again to her lips, and this time he didn't hide it. But just as quickly, he pushed to his feet and walked past her, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. That night, neither of them slept easily. The rain had been relentless all day, drumming against the penthouse windows like it was trying to get in. Chisholm sat cross-legged on the floor with Minjun, helping him build a Lego city. Tae-soo had been shut away in his study since morning, but around dusk she heard the faint sound of a door opening. When she glanced up, he was leaning in the doorway, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "He's quiet today," Tae-soo said, nodding toward Min-jun. "He's saving his energy for bedtime rebellion," she replied, making the boy giggle. The corner of Tae-soo's mouth twitched. "You're good with him. It's not hard. Kids like honesty." His eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary before he turned toward the kitchen. Later that evening, Min-jun was in bed, the rain still hammering down. Chisholm went to the kitchen for tea and found Tae-soo there, sleeves rolled up, staring out the window with a drink in hand. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He glanced at her. "Didn't try." She poured hot water into a mug, the steam curling between them. "You seem heavier tonight." For a moment he said nothing. Then, "Jae is back in Seoul." The name hit the air like a weight. Chisholm set the mug down. "The woman who—" "Yes." His voice was clipped. "The woman who left me in a hospital bed with a scar and a ring on the table." She studied him quietly. The dim kitchen light caught the line of the scar, and she realized something. It wasn't the mark on his face that had hurt him most. It was the one left on his pride. "You don't have to see her," Chisholm said softly. He laughed, low and humorless. "In my world, you can't always choose who you see." "And in mine," she countered, "you can choose who you let close." Their eyes locked, the space between them shrinking in a way neither acknowledged aloud. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter. "You really don't flinch, do you?" "Why would I?" "Most people avoid looking at it." His hand brushed the scar, without thinking. "I'm not most people, Tae-soo." The sound of his name in her voice seemed to pull something taut inside him. He took a slow step forward. She didn't move back. Another step. Now she could smell his cologne, cedar and rain. His eyes searched hers for a long moment, like he was giving himself a final chance to pull away. But when his hand came up, fingertips brushing her jaw, the choice was already made. She felt her breath hitch. His touch was firm but careful, as though he was afraid she might vanish. And then he kissed her. It wasn't tentative, it was restrained, yes, but there was heat in it, a slow burn that had been gathering since the first time they'd locked eyes in that marble hallway. She kissed him back before she could think better of it, her hands curling lightly against his chest. When they broke apart, he didn't move his hand from her face. His eyes were darker now, searching, conflicted. "This is a mistake," he murmured. "Then we both just made it," she said quietly. For the next week, the air between them shifted. He was no warmer outwardly, still precise, still guarded, but there was a new current under everything. The way his gaze lingered a beat too long. The way his voice softened when he spoke to her alone. And yet, Jae's return loomed like a shadow. Mr. Park mentioned in passing that she had called the house twice. Once for closure, once for a conversation about the past. Chisholm didn't ask what he'd said to her. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. But late one night, she overheard him on the phone in the balcony lounge, voice low and sharp. "You made your choice, Jae. Don't pretend it was anything else." Her heart thudded at the sound of his tone, not angry, but wounded in a way she hadn't heard before. When he noticed her in the doorway, he ended the call abruptly. "She wants to meet," he said flatly. "Are you going to?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't know." Jae arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Chisholm was in the playroom with Min-jun when Mr. Park's voice came over the intercom. "Mr. Han has a visitor." Minutes later, Chisholm caught sight of her, tall, immaculately dressed, her beauty the kind that made heads turn instantly. He walked through the penthouse as if she owned it, heels clicking against marble. Chisholm pretended to busy herself in the kitchen, but she could hear their voices from the lounge. He said, "You've lost weight. But you're still you. Still the man I." Tae-soo replied, "The man you left." A pause. Ji made a comeback. "I was scared. I didn't know how to handle." Tae-soo replied, "My scar? Or the fact that I wasn't perfect anymore?" Chisholm's grip tightened on the mug she was washing. She told herself it was none of her business, but her heart pounded anyway. That night, Tae-soo didn't join Min-jun for dinner. When Chisholm went to check on him, she found him in the study, tie loosened, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen. "You're quiet," she said. "So are you." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you still love her?" His eyes lifted sharply to hers.
No.
"But she's a reminder of something I don't want to feel again." "And what's that?" "Being disposable." The word hung in the air. Without thinking, she crossed the room and took his hand. "You're not disposable, Tae-soo. Not to the people who matter." For a moment, he just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he pulled her into his arms. They stood there for what felt like a long time, his chin resting lightly against her hair. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers, and this time, there was no hesitation. His mouth found hers in a kiss that was deeper, hungrier than the first, not tentative but claiming. Her hands slid into his hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he didn't feel like a man holding back. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "I don't know how you got in here," he murmured, tapping his chest lightly. "But you're not leaving." 2 weeks later, news came from India. A renowned Ayurvedic doctor had sent an herbal scar cream, specially prepared after hearing about his case from a mutual business contact. At first, Tae-soo refused to use it. "I've lived with the scar this long," he said. But Chisholm smiled and told him, "Then use it for me. Let's see if it works." By the end of the month, the scar had softened noticeably. The angry edge had faded. But to Chisholm, he looked no different, because the man she loved wasn't defined by the line on his skin. One evening, as the three of them sat together after dinner, Ji called again. "I'm not answering," he said simply, turning the phone face down on the table. "Sure?" Chisholm asked lightly. He reached for her hand. "I'm sure." Spring came early that year. On a mild March morning, Tae-soo took her to the botanical gardens just outside the city. Cherry blossoms had started to bloom, their petals drifting in the breeze. He stopped under a tree, took both her hands, and looked at her with a seriousness that made her heart race. "I thought my life ended in that hospital bed," he said quietly. "But then you walked into my home, and somehow into my heart. You stayed when you had every reason to walk away. That's the only kind of love I want." Her throat tightened. "You have it. All of it." He kissed her there under the blossoms, not caring who saw, not caring about the scar, not caring about anything except the woman who had taught him he wasn't broken. A year later, the scar was barely visible, but he often told her it didn't matter. The man who once hid from the world now stood proudly beside her at company events, her hand in his, a soft smile on his face. And every so often when someone asked him what had healed him, the herbal cream or time, he'd glance at Chisholm and say, "Neither. It was love."